The billionaire humiliated the poor girl in Arabic. Seconds later, she completely surprised him. Before we continue, please comment on which part of the world you are watching from. The scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the crowded streets of downtown Dubai, where the clash between extreme wealth and devastating poverty played out daily like a cruel theater. Aurora Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carefully arranged the homemade sweets in her small wooden box, each piece representing hours of her mother's labor despite her deteriorating health. At just 19, Aurora had learned that survival meant swallowing pride and facing each day with unwavering determination. The contrast couldn't have been starker as luxury vehicles crawled through the traffic-clogged streets, their air-conditioned interiors shielding their occupants from the harsh reality outside. Among them sat Tariq Al-Mansouri, a 34-year-old oil magnate whose empire spanned continents, drumming his manicured fingers impatiently against the leather seat of his pristine white Bentley. His dark eyes reflected frustration as he watched the endless sea of cars ahead, each minute of delay costing him thousands in missed opportunities. Aurora approached the line of expensive cars with practiced caution, her threadbare dress and worn sandals marking her as an outsider in this world of gleaming metal and tinted windows. She had learned to read the subtle signs, which drivers might be receptive to her offerings and which would dismiss her without a second glance. Today, however, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way her mother had struggled to breathe that morning, or the mounting medical bills that seemed to multiply like shadows. But Aurora felt a desperate urgency she had never experienced before. As she moved closer to the magnificent Bentley, Aurora couldn't have imagined that this seemingly routine interaction would become the catalyst for a transformation that would challenge everything. Both she and the man inside believed about worth, dignity, and the true meaning of human connection in a world obsessed with material success. The midday heat had transformed the asphalt into a shimmering mirage, but Aurora pressed forward with the determination that had carried her family through countless hardships. Her mother, Eleanor, had been bedridden for 3 weeks now, her chronic respiratory condition worsening with each passing day. The doctor's latest visit had brought devastating news. Without proper treatment and medication, Elena might not survive another month. The cost of her care had already drained their meager savings, leaving Aurora as the sole provider for their survival. Each morning, Aurora would wake before dawn to help her mother prepare the traditional Mexican sweets that had become their lifeline. Elena's recipes, once passed down through generations, created small miracles of flavor that could brighten anyone's day. Despite her weakening condition, Elena insisted on teaching Aurora every detail, every secret ingredient, whispering instructions between labored breaths. "Misha," she would say, "these sweets carry our family's love. Never forget that what we give to others comes from our hearts, no matter how little we have." The streets of Dubai had become Aurora's classroom in human nature. She had learned to identify the compassionate souls who would purchase her sweets with genuine kindness, often paying more than asked. But she had also encountered those who treated her as invisible, or worse, as a nuisance to be brushed aside. The wealthy district was particularly challenging. The very people who could most afford her modest prices were often the least inclined to acknowledge her existence. Tariq Al-Mansouri sat trapped in his luxury vehicle, his patience wearing thinner with each passing minute. His day had already been filled with frustrating setbacks. A merger deal had stalled, his biggest client was threatening to withdraw, and now this traffic was making him late for a crucial meeting with international investors. His empire, built through shrewd business decisions and an iron will, demanded constant attention and perfect timing. In Tariq's world, delay meant weakness, and weakness meant failure. His phone buzzed incessantly with urgent messages from his assistant, each one reminding him of the millions at stake. Tariq had built his fortune by maintaining absolute control over every aspect of his business, but today felt different, as if the universe itself was conspiring against him. His jaw tightened as he watched street vendors weaving between the cars, their persistent presence adding to his growing irritation. Growing up as the youngest son in a prominent family, Tariq had been groomed for success from birth. His father had taught him that respect was earned through power and wealth, that the world was divided between those who commanded and those who served. "Never show weakness, Tariq," his father had often said. "The moment you show compassion to those beneath you, they will see it as an opportunity to take advantage. These lessons had shaped Tariq into a formidable businessman, but they had also built walls around his heart that seemed impenetrable. Aurora approached the line of expensive cars with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She had learned to read body language through car windows, the subtle signs that indicated whether an occupant might be receptive or hostile. The gleaming Bentley stood out, even among the other luxury vehicles, its pristine condition speaking of wealth beyond her imagination. Through the slightly tinted window, she could see the silhouette of a man in an expensive suit, his posture radiating authority and impatience. Taking a deep breath, Aurora gathered her courage and approached the passenger window. She knew that her appearance, the faded dress that had been mended multiple times, the worn sandals held together with careful stitches, the calloused hands that spoke of hard work, might prejudice potential customers against her, but her mother's labored breathing that morning had given her a strength born of desperation. The traffic remained motionless, creating a pressure cooker of frustration and heat. Aurora could feel the weight of curious stares from other street vendors, some encouraging, others warning her away from the obviously expensive vehicle. She had learned that the wealthy could be unpredictable, some surprisingly generous, others harshly dismissive. As she reached the Bentley's window, Aurora had no way of knowing that the man inside was about to unleash a verbal assault that would test everything she had learned about dignity, resilience, and the power of knowledge to transform even the most hostile encounter. The tinted window of the Bentley remained closed as Aurora stood beside the magnificent vehicle, her small box of sweets feeling heavier with each passing second. She could sense the tension emanating from inside the car, but her mother's deteriorating condition gave her the courage to persist. Gently, she tapped on the window with her knuckles, the sound barely audible above the rumble of engines and honking horns that filled the congested street. Inside the Bentley, Tariq's irritation reached a boiling point. The tapping sound felt like an assault on his already frayed nerves. His meeting with the European investors was now 15 minutes behind schedule, and every moment of delay was costing him credibility in a deal worth over $200 million. When he saw the young woman standing beside his car through his peripheral vision, something inside him snapped. The careful composure he maintained in boardrooms cracked under the pressure of a day filled with mounting frustrations. With a sharp motion, Tariq pressed the window button, lowering it just enough to speak. The blast of air conditioning from inside the car hit Aurora's face, a stark reminder of the vast gulf between their worlds. She smiled tentatively, her dark eyes bright with hope, despite her obvious exhaustion. "Excuse me, sir," she began in English, her accent thick but her words carefully chosen. "Would you like to try some traditional sweets? They're made fresh this morning by my mother. And what do you think you're doing?" Tariq's voice cut through her words like a blade, sharp and filled with disdain. His expensive cologne mingled with the leather scent of his car's interior, creating an atmosphere of luxury that felt suffocating against the backdrop of Aurora's humble offering. "Can't you see I'm busy? I don't have time for this nonsense." Aurora's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. Years of facing rejection had taught her patience. "I understand you're busy, sir, but these are really special. My mother has been making them for 20 years and—" She tried again, her voice gentle but persistent. That's when Tariq's composure completely shattered. The pressure of his failing day, combined with what he perceived as this young woman's stubborn refusal to accept his dismissal, triggered something dark within him. He began speaking in rapid, harsh Arabic, his voice rising with each word. "هذه الفتاة مزعجة جدا. لماذا لا تفهم أن أمثالها يجب أن يختفوا من هنا?" This girl is so annoying. Why doesn't she understand that people like her should disappear from here? The words poured out of him like venom, fueled by years of privilege and a worldview that had never been challenged. إنها تضيع وقتي الثمين. هؤلاء الباعة المتجولون مثل الحشرات ينتشرون في كل مكان ولا يعرفون مكانهم. She's wasting my precious time. These street vendors are like insects. They spread everywhere and don't know their place. Other drivers and pedestrians nearby began to notice the commotion. Some rolled down their windows slightly, drawn by Tariq's raised voice and the obvious distress it was causing. A few people stopped walking, creating a small crowd of onlookers who watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. The contrast was stark and painful to witness. A wealthy man in his luxury vehicle, verbally assaulting a young woman who was simply trying to survive. Aurora stood frozen, feeling the heat of humiliation rise in her cheeks. Although she couldn't understand every word, the tone and intent were unmistakably cruel. She felt the stares of the gathered crowd, some sympathetic, others merely curious about the spectacle. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her box of sweets, but something deeper than embarrassment was stirring within her. Tariq continued his verbal assault, oblivious to the growing crowd or the impact of his words. يجب أن تذهب إلى مكان آخر وتتوقف عن إزعاج الناس المحترمين. لا أريد أن أرى وجهها مرة أخرى. She should go somewhere else and stop bothering respectable people. I don't want to see her face again. The final straw came when Tariq leaned forward, his face contorted with anger and superiority. إذا لم تختف من هنا الآن سأتصل بالأمن لإزالتها بالقوة. هذه الشوارع ليست مكانها. If she doesn't disappear from here now, I'll call security to remove her by force. These streets are not her place. As his words echoed in the confined space between them, Aurora felt something shift inside her. The humiliation was transforming into something else entirely, a quiet strength that came from years of adversity and a secret that no one in this crowd, least of all the arrogant man in the expensive car, could have imagined. The moment of silence that followed Tariq's cruel words felt like the eye of a hurricane, deceptively calm before the storm that would forever change both their lives. Aurora closed her eyes briefly, drawing upon reserves of strength she had cultivated through years of struggle and an education that had come at tremendous personal cost. When she opened them again, there was a new light burning within. Not the fire of anger, but the steady glow of dignity reclaimed. The crowd that had gathered seemed to hold its collective breath as Aurora straightened her shoulders and looked directly into Tariq's eyes. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and measured, carrying the weight of careful pronunciation and perfect grammar. The words flowed from her lips like poetry, each syllable precisely articulated in flawless Arabic. سيدي الكريم، أعتذر إن كان وجودي قد أزعجك، لكن دعني أوضح لك شيئا مهما. Respected sir, I apologize if my presence has disturbed you, but let me clarify something important for you. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Tariq's mouth fell open in shock, his eyes widening as if he had just witnessed the impossible. The color drained from his face as the realization hit him like a physical blow. She had understood every single word of his humiliating tirade, every insult, every degrading comment, every arrogant assumption about her worth and place in society had been absorbed and comprehended by the very person he had sought to demean. Around them, the small crowd began to murmur in amazement. Some pulled out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The other drivers in nearby vehicles craned their necks to see what was happening, drawn by the sudden shift in energy that seemed to electrify the air itself. Aurora continued, her Arabic flowing with the fluency of someone who had spent countless hours mastering not just the language, but its cultural nuances and poetic traditions. لقد فهمت كل كلمة قلتها، وأريدك أن تعرف أنني لست مجرد فتاة فقيرة تبيع الحلوى. أنا طالبة في السنة الثالثة في دراسة الأدب العربي بجامعة الإمارات، وأتحدث 4 لغات بطلاقة. I understood every word you said, and I want you to know that I'm not just a poor girl selling sweets. I'm a third-year student studying Arabic literature at the University of the Emirates, and I speak 4 languages fluently. The revelation hit the gathered crowd like a thunderclap. Whispers began to ripple through the onlookers as they processed what they had just heard. Here was a young woman who, despite her modest appearance and humble circumstances, possessed an education that many of the wealthy individuals stuck in traffic around them could never claim. The juxtaposition was staggering. A street vendor who could discuss Arabic poetry with university professors, hidden behind worn clothes and calloused hands. Tariq sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling as he tried to reconcile the image he had constructed of Aurora with this new reality. His assumptions, built on years of privilege and prejudice, crumbled like a house of cards in a windstorm. The confidence that had carried him through countless business dealings evaporated, leaving him feeling exposed and small in a way he had never experienced. Aurora's voice softened, but her words carried an undeniable strength. أعمل في بيع الحلوى ليس لأنني جاهلة أو كسولة، بل لأن والدتي مريضة وتحتاج للعلاج. كل قرش أكسبه يذهب لدوائها ورعايتها الطبية. أدرس في الليل بعد العمل وأحلم بأن أصبح مترجمة لمساعدة الناس على التفاهم بدلاً من إساءة فهم بعضهم البعض. I work selling sweets, not because I'm ignorant or lazy, but because my mother is sick and needs treatment. Every penny I earn goes toward her medicine and medical care. I study at night after work, and I dream of becoming a translator to help people understand each other instead of misunderstanding one another. The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. People were recording on their phones, capturing a moment that would soon spread across social media platforms and news outlets. But for Aurora, the crowd had faded into background noise. Her focus was entirely on the man who had tried to break her spirit and had instead revealed his own moral poverty. لكن الأهم من ذلك كله, Aurora continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. تعلمت أن الكرامة الحقيقية لا تأتي من المال أو السيارات الفخمة، بل من كيفية معاملتنا للآخرين، خاصة أولئك الذين نعتقد أنهم أقل منا. أنت تملك الكثير من المال، ولكن ما رأيته اليوم يظهر فقراً حقيقياً، فقر الروح والأخلاق. But most important of all, I've learned that true dignity doesn't come from money or luxury cars, but from how we treat others, especially those we think are beneath us. You have a lot of money, but what I've seen today shows real poverty, poverty of spirit and morals. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the honking of car horns seemed to fade as if the city itself was holding its breath. Tariq sat motionless, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. For the first time in his adult life, he found himself completely without words, stripped of the armor of wealth and status that had protected him from ever having to confront the humanity of those he considered beneath him. A woman in the crowd began to clap slowly. Then others joined in. The applause wasn't mocking or triumphant, it was respectful, recognizing courage and dignity in the face of humiliation. An elderly man called out in Arabic, Barakallah feek yabnati, God bless you, my daughter, his voice carrying the weight of generational wisdom and approval. Aurora looked around at the faces surrounding her, people from all walks of life who had witnessed something profound. Some were fellow immigrants and workers who understood her struggle intimately. Others were wealthy individuals who were perhaps seeing their own behavior reflected in Tariq's actions and finding it uncomfortable to confront. But Aurora wasn't finished. She had one more thing to say, and it would prove to be the most powerful words of all. Taking a step closer to Tariq's window, she spoke quietly, her words meant for him alone, but audible enough for the nearest onlookers to hear. أعرف من أنت سيد طارق المنصوري. قرأت عن إمبراطوريتك التجارية وإنجازاتك في الصحف. كان بإمكانك أن تكون مثالاً يحتذى به، قائداً يرفع الآخرين بدلاً من إسقاطهم. لكن المال لم يجعلك رجلاً أفضل، بل أعماه عن رؤية الإنسانية في الآخرين. I know who you are, Mr. Tariq al-Mansouri. I've read about your business empire and achievements in the newspapers. You could have been an example to follow, a leader who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. But money hasn't made you a better man. It's blinded you to seeing the humanity in others. The mention of his name sent another shockwave through Tariq's already reeling consciousness. Not only had this remarkable young woman understood his cruel words and responded with eloquence that put his own education to shame, but she also knew exactly who he was. The realization that his public humiliation of her could be traced back to him personally added a layer of consequence he hadn't considered. His reputation, carefully built over decades of strategic business moves and philanthropic gestures, suddenly felt as fragile as glass. Aurora reached into her small box and pulled out one of her mother's carefully crafted sweets. The piece was small but perfect, wrapped in delicate tissue paper with the kind of attention to detail that spoke of pride in one's work, regardless of its scale. She placed it gently on the window ledge of his car, the simple gesture carrying more dignity than any grand gesture ever could. هذه هدية من أمي إليك مجانا، ليس لأنك تستحقها بعدما قلته، ولكن لأنها علمتني أن الخير يجب أن ينتشر حتى لو لم نتلقه في المقابل. ربما عندما تتذوقها ستتذكر أن وراء كل إنسان تحتقره قصة وأحلام وكرامة تستحق الاحترام. This is a gift from my mother to you, free of charge. Not because you deserve it after what you said, May, but because she taught me that goodness must spread, even when we don't receive it in return. Perhaps when you taste it, you'll remember that behind every person you despise, there's a story, dreams and dignity that deserves respect. The crowd watched in amazement as Aurora performed this act of grace. Here was someone who had been publicly humiliated, yet she responded not with revenge or anger, but with a lesson in humanity that cut deeper than any insult ever could. Some people in the crowd began to weep openly, moved by the profound demonstration of character they were witnessing. Tariq stared at the small wrapped sweet as if it were a foreign object he couldn't comprehend. His mind raced through a lifetime of interactions, seeing them now through a lens he had never been forced to use before. How many people had he dismissed? How many opportunities for genuine human connection had he missed because of his arrogance and prejudice? The questions poured through his consciousness like water through a broken dam. A young man in the crowd, clearly a university student based on his backpack and books, stepped forward and asked in Arabic, "Sister, which university did you say you attend? I'm studying international relations, and I've never heard Arabic spoken so beautifully by someone who isn't native-born." His question was respectful, filled with genuine admiration for Aurora's linguistic skills. Aurora turned toward him with the first genuine smile she had shown since the encounter began. جامعة الإمارات، كلية الآداب والعلوم الإنسانية. أدرس الأدب العربي مع التركيز على الشعر الكلاسيكي. أحب لغتكم الجميلة وثقافتكم الغنية، ولهذا قررت أن أتعلمها بعمق. University of the Emirates, College of Arts and Humanities. I study Arabic literature with a focus on classical poetry. I love your beautiful language and rich culture, which is why I decided to learn it deeply. An older Arab woman in an expensive car nearby had rolled down her window and was listening intently. She called out, "يا ابنتي أنت تتكلمين العربية أفضل من أحفادي. من علمك?" My daughter, you speak Arabic better than my grandchildren. Who taught you? تعلمت بنفسي في البداية من الكتب والإنترنت، ثم حصلت على منحة جزئية للجامعة. أعمل في النهار وأدرس في الليل. حلمي أن أصبح جسرا بين الثقافات. أساعد الناس على فهم بعضهم البعض بدلا من الحكم على بعضهم بناء على المظاهر. I taught myself initially from books and the internet. Then I received a partial scholarship to university. I work during the day and study at night. My dream is to become a bridge between cultures, helping people understand each other instead of judging based on appearances. The conversation was transforming the entire atmosphere of the street. What had begun as a moment of cruelty was evolving into an impromptu cultural exchange. People from different backgrounds found themselves engaged in meaningful dialogue, inspired by Aurora's example. A businessman from a nearby Mercedes got out of his car and approached Aurora, speaking in English. "Miss, I couldn't help but overhear. I run a translation company, and we're always looking for talented linguists. Would you be interested in part-time work that might help with your mother's medical expenses?" Before Aurora could respond, an elderly gentleman with the bearing of an academic stepped forward. "Young lady, I'm Professor Hassan Al-Zahra from the American University of Dubai. Your Arabic is exceptional. Have you considered our graduate program in translation studies? We have scholarships available for students of your caliber." More people began to step forward, each offering something: business cards, job opportunities, connections to medical professionals who might help with her mother's condition. The street had transformed from a place of division into a community united by witnessing something extraordinary. Throughout this remarkable transformation, Tariq remained seated in his car, observing the scene unfold around Aurora. He watched as she gracefully accepted each offer of help, responding to everyone with the same respect and dignity she had shown to him, despite his cruel treatment of her. The contrast between her behavior and his own had never been stark. His phone continued to buzz with urgent messages about his missed meeting, but for the first time in his career, Tariq found himself unable to care about business matters. Something fundamental was shifting inside him, a recognition that all his wealth and power meant nothing if it came at the cost of his humanity. As Aurora continued to speak with the people who had gathered around her, sharing her story with humility and grace, Tariq found himself reaching for the small sweet she had placed on his window ledge. His hand trembled slightly as he unwrapped the delicate tissue paper, revealing a piece that had been crafted with the same care and attention that Aurora brought to everything she did. When he placed it in his mouth, the flavors exploded across his palate, complex, nuanced, perfect. It was clear that this was not just a sweet, but a work of art created by someone who took pride in their craft, regardless of the humble circumstances in which it was practiced. As he swallowed, Tariq felt tears gathering in his eyes for the first time since childhood. The traffic was beginning to move, but neither Tariq nor the crowd seemed to notice. They were all transfixed by the woman who had turned a moment of humiliation into a lesson in dignity, transforming not just the immediate situation, but potentially the lives of everyone who witnessed her grace under pressure. As the crowd continued to grow around Aurora, Tariq made a decision that would have been unthinkable just minutes before. With his hands still trembling from the emotional weight of what he had witnessed, he turned off his engine and stepped out of his Bentley. The action caused a ripple of surprise through the gathered people, many of whom recognized him from business magazines and society pages. The sight of the wealthy businessman emerging from his luxury vehicle to join the impromptu street gathering was unprecedented. Tariq stood at the edge of the circle that had formed around Aurora, his expensive suit and polished shoes marking him as an outsider in this spontaneous community. He listened as she continued to share her story with the people who had approached her, each word revealing layers of strength, intelligence, and character that his prejudice had blinded him to completely. Mi madre llegó aquí desde México hace 20 años. Aurora was explaining to a group that now included people from multiple nationalities, seamlessly switching between English and Spanish as she spoke. She worked 3 jobs to put me through school, cleaning offices at night, working in a hotel kitchen during the day, and making these sweets whenever she had a free moment. When I got accepted to university, she cried for hours, not from sadness, but from joy that her daughter would have opportunities she never had. An Indian businessman in the crowd nodded knowingly. My father drove a taxi for 15 years so I could become an engineer. These are the real success stories, not the headlines in Forbes magazine, but the quiet sacrifices of parents who believe in their children's dreams. Aurora's eyes brightened as she recognized a kindred spirit. Exactly. My mother always says that education is the one thing that can never be taken away from you, no matter how poor you are. That's why I study so hard and why I learn languages, because knowledge is power, and with power comes responsibility to help others. Professor Al-Zahra, who had introduced himself earlier, was taking notes on his phone. Miss, I'm serious about our scholarship program. Your linguistic abilities combined with your cultural sensitivity would make you an exceptional translator. May I ask how many languages you speak fluently? 4 fluently: Spanish, English, Arabic, and French. I'm working on Mandarin and Portuguese in my spare time, Aurora replied, with a modesty that somehow made her accomplishments even more impressive. A woman from the crowd called out, "How do you find time to study so many languages while working and caring for your mother?" Aurora's expression grew more serious. "You find time for what matters to you. I study on buses, during breaks at work, sometimes until 3 in the morning. When your mother is dying and you know that education is the only way to build a better life, you don't waste a single moment." The raw honesty of her words created a profound silence. Even those who had never experienced poverty could feel the weight of her determination and sacrifice. Tariq, standing at the periphery of the group, felt each word like a physical blow to his conscience. Here was someone who had achieved more with fewer resources than many people accomplished with unlimited advantages. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an American physician who had been stuck in traffic in her own car, pushed forward through the crowd. "Excuse me, dear. You mentioned your mother is ill. What's her condition?" "I specialize in respiratory diseases at Dubai Medical Center." Aurora's composure wavered for the first time, hope and desperation mixing in her expression. "She has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. The doctors say she needs a new medication regimen and possibly oxygen therapy, but..." She hesitated, clearly struggling with the admission of their financial limitations. "But it's expensive, Doctor," Mitchell finished gently. "I understand. Would you be willing to bring your mother to see me? I do pro bono work for patients who need help accessing care." Tears began to form in Aurora's eyes, but she maintained her composure. "Doctor, we couldn't afford to pay you back for months, maybe years. Who said anything about paying me back?" Dr. Mitchell smiled warmly. "Sometimes the best payment is knowing we've made a difference in someone's life. Here's my card. Call my office tomorrow morning." The generosity continued to pour forth from the crowd. A local business owner offered Aurora part-time work that would accommodate her class schedule. A woman who owned a small publishing company expressed interest in Aurora's translation skills. An elderly man who had immigrated from Lebanon decades earlier pressed money into her hands, refusing to take it back despite her protests. Throughout this outpouring of human kindness, Tariq remained rooted to his spot, observing the transformation taking place not just in Aurora's circumstances, but in the very nature of the street itself. What had begun as a typical day of urban indifference had become something extraordinary, a reminder that community and compassion could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Finally, as the immediate offers of help began to wind down, Aurora turned toward the larger crowd. Her voice carried clearly in the warm afternoon air as she spoke in Arabic, then repeated her words in English for those who needed translation. أشكركم جميعا من أعماق قلبي. لقد أظهرتم لي اليوم أن الخير لا يزال موجودا في هذا العالم، وأن الناس يمكن أن يقفوا معا عندما يرون الحاجة الحقيقية. لن أنسى كرمكم أبدا. I thank you all from the depths of my heart. You've shown me today that goodness still exists in this world, and that people can stand together when they see real need. I will never forget your generosity. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart, she repeated in English. Today, you've shown me that kindness is stronger than cruelty, that understanding can triumph over prejudice, and that strangers can become family when we see each other as human beings rather than statistics or stereotypes. As she spoke these words, her eyes found Tariq's across the crowd. For a moment, they stood looking at each other, the wealthy businessman who had tried to diminish her, and the young woman who had responded to his cruelty with grace that elevated everyone around her. In that moment of eye contact, something passed between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition of a shared humanity that his words had tried to deny. The crowd began to disperse gradually, people returning to their vehicles as traffic started moving again, but the energy of the encounter lingered. Conversations continuing between strangers who had become connected through witnessing something remarkable. Business cards were exchanged, phone numbers shared, promises made to follow up on offers of help. Tariq found himself walking slowly back toward his Bentley, but he stopped before reaching it. The thought of simply driving away, of returning to his climate-controlled isolation, felt impossible now. He turned back toward Aurora, who was carefully packing away her remaining sweets while talking quietly with Dr. Mitchell about arrangements for her mother's care. Taking a deep breath that felt like the first real breath he had taken in years, Tariq walked back across the distance he had tried to create between himself and the woman he had so grievously wronged. Each step felt like a small act of courage, a movement away from the person he had been towards someone he might yet become. As Tariq approached Aurora, the last few people were saying their goodbyes, pressing final business cards into her hands and making her promise to stay in touch. Dr. Mitchell was explaining the process for scheduling her mother's appointment, while Professor Alzara was outlining the scholarship application process. The transformation in Aurora's circumstances had been dramatic, but Tariq could see that she remained fundamentally unchanged, gracious, humble, and focused on how these opportunities could help her mother rather than herself. When the final well-wisher had departed, Aurora found herself standing alone with Tariq for the first time since their encounter had begun. The street had returned to its normal rhythm of traffic and pedestrians, but the energy of what had transpired still crackled in the air between them. Aurora looked up at him with eyes that held no anger or resentment, only a quiet strength that made Tariq feel more exposed than he had ever felt in any boardroom or business negotiation. "Miss Aurora," Tariq began, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign on his tongue. When was the last time he had spoken to someone without the armor of authority and wealth protecting him? I need to—" He stopped, realizing that the Arabic words were coming more naturally than English, as if the language she had mastered so beautifully was demanding its own role in his redemption. "أريد أن أعتذر لك، ولكنني أعلم أن كلمة آسف لا تكفي لما فعلته. لقد أظهرت لي اليوم شيئا عن نفسي لم أرغب في رؤيته، وشيئا عنك لم أكن أتوقعه أبدا. I want to apologize to you, but I know that the word sorry isn't enough for what I did. You've shown me today something about myself that I didn't want to see, and something about you that I never expected." Aurora listened intently, her expression neutral but not cold. When he paused, she spoke quietly in Arabic. "الاعتذار خطوة أولى، ولكن الأهم هو ما ستفعله بعد ذلك." An apology is a first step, but what matters more is what you do after that. Her words hit him with the force of truth. She was right. Words, no matter how sincere, were meaningless without action to back them up. Tariq had built his empire on the principle that results mattered more than intentions. Yet here he was offering empty words to someone who had just demonstrated that character was measured by deeds, not declarations. "You're absolutely right," he said, switching back to English. "I've spent my entire life believing that success justified any behavior, that wealth gave me the right to dismiss anyone I considered beneath me. But watching you today, seeing how you responded to cruelty with dignity, how you transformed hatred into an opportunity for human connection, I've realized that I've been the poorest person on this street." Aurora tilted her head slightly, studying his face for signs of sincerity. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, I don't need your apology for my sake. I know who I am, and no one's words can change that. But I think you need to apologize to yourself for becoming someone who could say those things, for wasting the privilege you've been given." The insight cut deep because it was so accurate. Tariq had indeed become someone he wouldn't have recognized in his younger years, when he still possessed ideals and dreams beyond mere accumulation of wealth. Somewhere along the path to success, he had lost sight of the values his grandmother had tried to instill in him about treating all people with dignity and respect. "I want to help," Tariq said suddenly, the words surprising him as much as they did Aurora. "Your mother's medical bills, your education, whatever you need. I know that money can't undo what I said, but perhaps it can be a start toward doing something meaningful with the privilege I've been given." Aurora's expression grew more guarded. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Al-Mansouri, but I'm not looking for charity from someone who just called me worthless. The people who helped me today did so because they saw my humanity, not because they felt guilty about their prejudices." Her rejection stung, but Tariq recognized it was deserved. "You're right again. I was trying to buy my way out of discomfort, rather than earning redemption through genuine change. But please, tell me how I can learn to be better. You've studied Arabic culture and literature. You understand the concept of honor and responsibility better than I do." Apparently, this seemed to give Aurora pause. She set down her box of sweets and considered his request carefully. "In Arabic literature, there's a concept called at-tawbatun nasuh, sincere repentance. It's not just saying you're sorry. It's fundamentally changing your heart and your actions. If you're serious about learning to be better, don't focus on grand gestures or donations. Start by seeing people, really seeing them." "What do you mean?" Tariq asked, genuinely curious. "Start with your employees, the security guards in your building, the cleaners who work in your office, the drivers and assistants and all the people who make your life possible, but whom you probably don't even notice. Learn their names. Ask about their families. Understand their struggles. Wealth isn't evil, Mr. Al-Mansouri, but using it to build walls between yourself and other human beings is." As she spoke, Tariq began to realize the scope of his transformation that would be required. It wasn't just about changing his behavior toward people like Aurora. It was about fundamentally restructuring his entire worldview and the way he moved through life. "The people who helped me today," Aurora continued, "they didn't do it because they had excess money to throw around. They did it because they recognized themselves in my struggle. Dr. Mitchell understands what it's like to want to heal people. Professor Alzara knows what it means to believe in the power of education. That businessman saw his own immigrant parents in my story. They helped because they saw connection, not difference." Tariq nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "So the question isn't how much money I give away, but whether I can learn to see connection instead of difference." "Exactly." Aurora picked up her box again, preparing to continue her day. "And that's work only you can do, Mr. Al-Mansouri. I can't teach you empathy, that has to come from within." As she began to walk away, Tariq felt a panic rise in his chest. "Wait," he called out. Could I see you again? To show you that I'm serious about changing, to prove that today meant something." Aurora turned back, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, if you truly change, our paths will cross again naturally. The universe has a way of bringing together people who are meant to learn from each other. Focus on becoming the man you want to be, not on proving anything to me." With that, she walked away, leaving Tariq standing alone beside his luxury car in the middle of a busy street, holding the wrapper from a small sweet, and feeling like his entire life had been turned upside down by a young woman who sold candy to survive while pursuing her dreams of bridging cultural divides. 3 months had passed since that transformative afternoon on the busy Dubai street, and Tariq's life had undergone changes so fundamental that his closest associates barely recognized him. The man who had once swept through his corporate headquarters without acknowledging the existence of support staff now stopped to greet security guards by name, inquired about their families, and had instituted a company-wide program providing healthcare coverage for all employees' dependents. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. Tariq's first attempts at connecting with his employees had been awkward and stilted, his privilege creating a barrier that took conscious effort to dismantle. Hassan, the elderly security guard who had worked the night shift in Tariq's building for 15 years, had initially been suspicious when his boss suddenly began asking about his grandchildren. "Why does Mr. Al-Mansouri want to know about my family?" Hassan had confided to his colleague. "Is he planning to fire me?" But Tariq's persistence and genuine effort to understand the lives of the people around him gradually broke down the walls of mistrust. When he learned that Hassan's grandson needed surgery, but the family couldn't afford it, Tariq didn't simply write a check. Instead, he worked with HR to expand the company's insurance coverage to include employees' grandchildren. When Fatima, one of the cleaning staff, mentioned that she was taking English classes at night, Tariq arranged for the company to cover her tuition and gave her flexible hours to accommodate her studies. These weren't the grand gestures his old self might have made to assuage guilt, but careful, thoughtful changes that addressed systemic issues rather than individual emergencies. Tariq had begun to understand that true change meant restructuring systems, not just providing band-aid solutions. The business world had initially been skeptical of these changes. At board meetings, some investors questioned whether Tariq's soft approach would impact profits. However, the opposite proved true. Employee satisfaction soared, productivity increased, and the company's reputation as an employer of choice attracted top talent. More importantly for Tariq, he found himself genuinely looking forward to going to work, energized by connections with people rather than drained by the isolation of pure profit pursuit. During these months of personal transformation, Tariq had often thought about Aurora, but had resisted the urge to seek her out. Her words about paths crossing naturally if he truly changed echoed in his mind, serving as both guidance and a test of his sincerity. Instead of trying to force a reunion, he focused on becoming someone worthy of the lessons she had taught him. The changes extended beyond his professional life. Tariq began volunteering at a local literacy center, using his business skills to help immigrants navigate the complex systems of their new country. He discovered that many of the people he worked with had stories similar to Aurora's, highly educated individuals working in survival jobs while pursuing dreams that seemed impossibly distant. There was Amara, a former engineer from Syria, who cleaned hotels while studying for certification exams that would allow her to practice her profession in the UAE. There was Chen, a philosophy professor from China, who delivered food while learning Arabic to expand his teaching opportunities. Each person he met reinforced Aurora's lesson about the danger of judging others based on their current circumstances rather than their potential and character. One evening, while helping a young Ethiopian woman practice English for a job interview, Tariq found himself thinking about the concept Aurora had mentioned, a tawbatun nasuh, sincere repentance. He realized that his transformation was not a destination, but a continuous journey of choosing connection over separation, understanding over judgment, and humility over arrogance. The literacy center was located in a diverse neighborhood that Tariq had never previously visited, despite living in Dubai his entire life. The area was home to immigrants from dozens of countries, small businesses that served their communities, and a vibrant street life that reminded him of that transformative afternoon. Walking through the neighborhood after his volunteer sessions, Tariq often found himself looking for Aurora, not with the intention of approaching her, but simply hoping to see evidence that her life had improved. His curiosity was satisfied one evening when he overheard two women talking in Arabic at a small cafe where he had stopped for tea. One was describing a remarkable young woman who had recently begun working as a freelance translator for several local businesses while continuing her university studies. "She speaks Arabic like a native," the woman was saying, "but she's from Mexico originally. My husband's import business has tripled its efficiency since she started helping with Arabic correspondence. And the sweetest part, she still makes time to help other immigrants with translation services, usually for free." Tariq's heart swelled with recognition and pride. Aurora had clearly continued to build bridges between communities, using her skills not just for her own advancement, but to lift others as well. The knowledge that she was thriving felt like a personal victory, confirmation that the universe had indeed conspired to help her succeed once her talents were properly recognized. As winter approached, Tariq's company announced its annual charity gala, traditionally a lavish affair, where wealthy donors gathered to write checks for causes they barely understood while enjoying expensive food and entertainment. This year, however, Tariq proposed a different approach. Instead of a traditional gala, why not create an event that truly brought together different communities to celebrate shared humanity? The idea evolved into a multicultural festival held in a public park, where local immigrant communities could showcase their cultures, small business owners could sell their products, and attendees could engage in meaningful conversations about the challenges and opportunities of life in a diverse city. Tariq's company sponsored the event, but the focus was on amplifying voices that were usually marginalized, rather than celebrating corporate generosity. The festival planning process itself became an exercise in the principles Aurora had taught him. Instead of hiring an expensive event planning company, Tariq worked directly with community leaders to understand what would be most beneficial for their neighborhoods. He learned about the challenges facing small business owners, the struggles of students balancing work and education, and the dreams of families trying to build better lives in a new country. 2 weeks before the festival, while reviewing the list of participating translators who would help facilitate communication between different language groups, Tariq saw a name that made his breath catch: Aurora Martinez, Arabic, Spanish, English, French translation services. She had been recommended by the literacy center where Tariq volunteered, though the coordinator didn't know about the connection between them. For the first time since their encounter, Tariq felt nervous about the possibility of seeing Aurora again. What would she think of the changes he had made? Would she be able to see that his transformation was genuine? Or would she still see him as the arrogant man who had humiliated her? More importantly, had he truly changed enough to deserve a second chance at making a first impression? The night before the festival, Tariq found himself unable to sleep. He walked out onto the balcony of his penthouse apartment, looking down at the city lights that represented millions of individual stories, dreams, and struggles. Somewhere out there, Aurora was probably preparing for tomorrow's event, perhaps reviewing notes or practicing pronunciation of difficult phrases in various languages. He thought about the man he had been 3 months ago, isolated in luxury, protected from human connection by walls of privilege and prejudice. That man would never have organized an event like this festival, would never have spent evenings helping immigrants practice English, would never have learned the names of his own employees. The transformation felt so complete that sometimes Tariq wondered if the old version of himself had been real, or just a protective shell he had constructed to avoid the vulnerability that came with genuine human connection. As dawn approached, Tariq made himself a simple breakfast in his kitchen, a skill he had only recently acquired after dismissing his full-time house staff in favor of a cleaning service that came twice a week. The change had initially been about reducing the hierarchy in his personal life, but he had discovered that taking care of his own basic needs created a sense of groundedness he had never experienced while being waited on constantly. Today would be the test of everything he had learned. Not a test of Aurora's willingness to forgive him, but a test of whether he had truly internalized the lessons she had taught about seeing people as full human beings rather than categories or stereotypes. If he had genuinely changed, their interaction, if it happened at all, would be natural and authentic. If he was still performing a version of humility to assuage his guilt, she would see through it immediately. The festival day dawned bright and clear, with a gentle breeze that carried the mingled aromas of dozens of different cuisines being prepared by vendors representing communities from around the world. Tariq arrived at the park early, but instead of positioning himself at the VIP area that had been prepared for major sponsors, he walked through the setup areas, checking in with vendors and volunteers, offering assistance where needed, and marveling at the transformation of the space into a vibrant celebration of human diversity. The Ethiopian coffee ceremony station was being arranged by a family Tariq recognized from the literacy center. The eldest daughter, Meron, was practicing her English presentation about the cultural significance of their traditional brewing process. When she stumbled over a particularly difficult phrase, Tariq offered gentle encouragement. "Your English has improved so much since we started working together," he said warmly. "Your family should be proud of how hard you're working." Merrin's mother, who had been listening from behind the coffee preparation area, emerged with tears in her eyes. In halting English, she expressed her gratitude not just for Tariq's encouragement of her daughter, but for the opportunity the festival provided for their community to share their culture with dignity, rather than being seen only as recipients of charity. Similar scenes were playing out across the park as vendors and cultural groups prepared their presentations. A group of Syrian musicians were tuning their instruments, preparing to perform pieces that blended traditional melodies with contemporary influences. A collective of women from various South Asian countries had collaborated to create an interactive henna station where visitors could learn about the cultural significance of the art while having their own hands decorated. What struck Tariq most powerfully was the atmosphere of mutual respect and curiosity that permeated the preparations. This wasn't a showcase of exotic cultures for the entertainment of wealthy donors, but a genuine celebration where each community was presenting their heritage with pride and authenticity. The difference felt profound and validated everything Aurora had tried to teach him about the importance of seeing people as full human beings with their own agency and dignity. As the festival opened to the public, Tariq found himself in his element not as a commanding corporate leader, but as a facilitator of connections between different groups. He watched with deep satisfaction as children from various backgrounds played together while their parents engaged in conversations that might never have happened in other circumstances. Business cards were being exchanged, friendships formed, and collaborative opportunities discussed organically. Near the translation services booth, Tariq caught his first glimpse of Aurora in 3 months. She was dressed professionally but simply, her hair pulled back efficiently as she worked with a small team of translators to help festival attendees communicate across language barriers. Even from a distance, Tariq could see that she carried herself with the same quiet confidence he remembered, but there was something different about her bearing, a sense of someone who had found her place in the world and was thriving in it. Aurora was currently helping an elderly Italian man communicate with a Bangladeshi spice vendor, her hands moving gracefully as she translated not just words, but cultural context, explaining the Italian man's curiosity about ingredients he had never encountered, and helping the vendor understand which of his spices might appeal to European tastes. The interaction resulted in both men learning something new and ended with the Italian gentleman purchasing several spices, while promising to return with his wife, who loved to cook. Tariq remained at a respectful distance, not wanting to intrude on Aurora's work, but unable to look away from the beautiful demonstration of her skills in action. This was clearly someone who had found their calling, using language as a bridge to help people connect across cultural divides, exactly as she had dreamed of doing during their first encounter. A commotion near the Syrian music area drew his attention away from Aurora. A group of teenagers had gathered around the musicians, but their body language suggested mockery rather than appreciation. Tariq could hear fragments of dismissive comments about weird music and why don't they just play normal songs. The situation had the potential to escalate into exactly the kind of cultural insensitivity that the festival was designed to counter. Without hesitation, Tariq approached the group, but instead of using his authority to simply disperse them, he engaged them in conversation. "Have you guys ever heard instruments like these before?" he asked with genuine curiosity. "I'm learning about different musical traditions today myself." The teenagers' aggressive posture softened slightly in response to his non-confrontational approach. One of them, a young man of about 16, shrugged. "It just sounds different. Like, why can't they play guitar or something normal?" "That's interesting," Tariq replied thoughtfully. "What do you think makes music normal?" "I was just thinking about how the guitar itself came to Europe from Arabic cultures hundreds of years ago. Maybe all music is just different cultures sharing their innovations with each other." This sparked a genuine conversation about musical influences and cultural exchange. The Syrian musicians, overhearing the discussion, invited the teenagers to try playing some of their instruments. What had begun as potential conflict transformed into a learning experience, with the young people gaining appreciation for the skill required to play unfamiliar instruments, and the musicians enjoying the opportunity to share their passion with a new audience. As the impromptu music lesson continued, Tariq noticed Aurora watching from her booth, a smile of recognition and approval on her face. Their eyes met across the crowd, and she nodded slightly, not a gesture of forgiveness exactly, but of acknowledgement that she had witnessed something authentic. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meaningful connections and small moments of cultural bridge building. Tariq found himself constantly moving through the festival, not as a VIP to be deferred to, but as someone genuinely engaged with the experiences being shared. He learned to prepare Ethiopian injera bread, attempted to follow the intricate steps of a Bollywood dance lesson, and engaged in passionate discussions about poetry with a group of Arabic literature students who reminded him powerfully of Aurora's scholarly pursuits. As evening approached and the festival began to wind down, Tariq made his way toward the translation booth. Aurora was finishing up a complex conversation between a Filipino nurse and an elderly Arabic-speaking man about proper medication schedules, her patience and skill evident as she navigated not just linguistic differences, but also cultural approaches to healthcare communication. When the conversation concluded successfully, with both parties clearly understanding each other and the nurse having gained valuable insights into culturally sensitive patient care, Aurora finally turned her attention to Tariq, who had been waiting respectfully at the edge of the booth area. "Mr. Al-Mansouri," she said simply, her tone neutral but not cold. "I heard you were one of the organizers of this festival." "One of them, yes," Tariq replied, careful not to claim more credit than he deserved. "Though I learned quickly that organizing something like this is really about listening to communities and providing support for their own ideas, rather than imposing my vision." Aurora studied his face for a moment, and Tariq felt as if she was seeing directly into his soul, evaluating the authenticity of his transformation with the same perceptiveness that had allowed her to master languages and cultural nuances. "This is quite different from a typical corporate charity event," she observed. "I've learned that there's a difference between charity and community building," Tariq said. Today was about the latter. For the first time since their reunion, Aurora smiled genuinely. "Yes," she said simply. It was. As the festival grounds slowly emptied and vendors began packing their displays, Aurora approached Tariq with purposeful steps. The evening light cast long shadows across the park, and the lingering aromas of international cuisines created an almost magical atmosphere around their second meaningful encounter. "Mr. Al-Mansouri," she began, but then paused and smiled slightly. "Actually, may I call you Tariq? After everything that's happened, formality seems unnecessary." "Please," he replied, feeling a warmth spread through his chest at this small gesture of acceptance. Aurora gestured toward a bench near the now quiet Syrian music area. "I wanted to tell you something. 3 months ago, when you humiliated me on that street, I went home that night and cried, not from your words, but from exhaustion. I was so tired of fighting, of proving my worth to people who couldn't see past my circumstances." Tariq felt his stomach clench with renewed shame, but Aurora continued before he could speak. "But then, something interesting happened. The video of our encounter went viral. Did you know that? Someone in the crowd posted it, and within days, millions of people had seen it. I received hundreds of messages from people around the world sharing their own stories of being underestimated, of being judged by their appearance rather than their character." She pulled out her phone and showed him a social media page titled, "Bridges Not Walls, Community Translation Project." The follower count was approaching 50,000. I used that moment, our moment, to start something bigger. I began connecting immigrants with language barriers to native speakers willing to help. What started as free translation services has grown into a network of cultural exchange programs, mentorship opportunities, and small business support initiatives. Tariq stared at the screen, amazed. "Aurora, this is incredible. You turned the worst moment of my life into something beautiful. Not just my life, Tariq, your life too." Her eyes met his directly. "Because what I realized watching you today is that you've undergone the same transformation I have. You took that moment of shame and used it as a catalyst for genuine change." She stood up and looked out over the festival grounds, where volunteers from dozens of countries were working together to clean up, many of them immigrants and refugees who now had stable employment through the connections made at events like this. "You know what the most powerful part of today was for me?" Aurora asked. "Watching you with those teenagers at the music booth. The old Tariq, the man from that street 3 months ago, would have used his authority to shut down their disrespect, but you engaged them as human beings. You helped them discover something new about themselves and the world. Tariq felt tears threatening for the second time since knowing Aurora. I still wake up some mornings ashamed of who I was, but then I think about what you taught me, that every day is a choice to see connection or difference, to build bridges or walls. Exactly, Aurora said softly, and here's what I want to propose to you now. She turned to face him fully, her expression serious but hopeful. My translation project has grown beyond what I can manage alone while finishing university. I need a partner, someone with business skills who understands that success isn't just measured in profits, but in lives changed and communities strengthened. Tariq's breath caught. Are you offering me the chance to work with you? I'm offering you the chance to help build something that matters, to use your privilege and resources in service of bringing people together instead of keeping them apart. To prove that transformation is possible, not just for individuals but for entire communities. The weight of the moment settled between them. This wasn't just a business proposition, it was an invitation to redemption, to meaningful purpose, and to a partnership built on the foundation of their shared journey from conflict to understanding. Aurora, Tariq said quietly, 3 months ago, you gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You showed me who I really was, and more importantly, who I could become. Now you're offering me the chance to spend my life giving that same gift to others. He extended his hand to her, not as a wealthy man offering charity, but as an equal partner in a mission that would challenge and change them both. I would be honored to build bridges with you. Aurora took his hand, and in that simple gesture, two people who had begun as strangers divided by prejudice and circumstance became partners united by purpose and possibility. 6 months later, the Bridges Not Walls Community Center occupied a beautifully renovated building in the heart of Dubai's most diverse neighborhood. What had started as Aurora's social media project had evolved into a comprehensive resource hub offering translation services, cultural exchange programs, small business incubation, and educational support for immigrants and refugees. Aurora, now graduated with honors from the University of the Emirates, served as the center's executive director of cultural programs, while Tariq had taken a leave of absence from his oil empire to focus entirely on developing sustainable funding models for community-based social enterprises. Their partnership had proven to be remarkably effective. Aurora's deep understanding of immigrant experiences combined with Tariq's business acumen created programs that were both impactful and financially viable. The center's success stories were numerous and varied. Chen, the former philosophy professor, now taught evening classes in comparative world philosophy while working as a certified Arabic translator. Meron from Ethiopia had received a full scholarship to study international business and worked part-time coordinating the center's youth programming. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had established a free clinic within the center, providing healthcare access to families who had previously gone without proper medical care. Most remarkably, Aurora's mother, Eleanor, had not only survived her health crisis, but had become one of the center's most beloved cooking instructors, teaching traditional Mexican cuisine while sharing stories of resilience and hope with newcomers facing their own challenges. The transformation extended far beyond individual success stories. The entire neighborhood had experienced an economic revitalization as the center attracted visitors from across the region who came to experience authentic cultural programming and purchase products from immigrant-owned businesses. What had once been a struggling area marked by cultural isolation had become a vibrant example of how diversity could be a source of strength and prosperity. For Tariq and Aurora, their partnership had evolved into a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to their mission. They had learned to challenge each other professionally while supporting each other personally, creating a working relationship that brought out the best in both of them. The success of their Dubai center had attracted attention from cities around the world, with requests for consultation on replicating their model in other diverse urban areas. They were currently developing plans for expansion, but always with the principle that each center must be designed and led by the communities it served rather than imposed from outside. As Aurora often told the groups of visitors who came to learn about their approach, true transformation isn't about changing other people. It's about creating conditions where everyone can discover and share their best selves. When we see each other as fully human, with complete stories and unlimited potential, magic happens. The lesson of that transformative afternoon on a busy Dubai street had rippled outward, touching thousands of lives and proving that even the most unlikely encounters could become catalysts for extraordinary change. In choosing understanding over judgment and connection over separation, two people had discovered that building bridges was not just about helping others cross divides. It was about finding their own way home to their shared humanity. Every day, we encounter people whose stories we don't know, whose struggles remain invisible to us, whose potential we might never recognize if we judge only by surface appearances. The truth is that extraordinary people walk among us constantly, in the form of street vendors pursuing advanced degrees, taxi drivers who were once university professors, and service workers building better futures for their families while contributing richly to our communities. The question isn't whether these encounters will happen, they're happening right now, all around us. The question is whether we'll have the courage to truly see the people we meet, to look beyond our assumptions and prejudices, and to recognize that every human interaction is an opportunity for transformation. What would change in your life if you approached each person you encountered today with genuine curiosity about their story? What bridges could you build if you chose connection over separation, understanding over judgment? The power to transform lives, including your own, exists in every conversation, every moment of eye contact, every choice to extend dignity and respect to another human being. Start today. Start with the next person you meet. The world is waiting for more bridge builders.